Going to hear from both candidates for Secretary of State in Arizona, Democrat Adrian Fontes and Republican Mark Finchem. The Secretary of State is not only the chief elections officer, but also in effect the lieutenant governor, the next in line should the governor die, be removed from office, or resign. And by the way, in Arizona, this happens quite a bit. It's happened 5 times, 4 times in the last 40 years. The matchup of Fontes and Finchem has been described as a showdown between one of the strongest critics of the 2020 election, Mr. Finchem, and Mr. Fontes, who has said there was no significant fraud in the election in 2020. We will hear from Mr. Finchem later in the program, but we will begin with Adrian Fontes, an Arizona native, former Maricopa County recorder, a lawyer, a former prosecutor, and Marine Corps veteran. Adrian, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, John.
Okay, there has to be a rationale to run. So why do you want this job?
Well, we've got to protect the republic from the extremists that have emerged, and we've got to have folks who are ready to do the job on day one. As you mentioned in your intro, I am the former Maricopa County recorder, and in 2020, I helped put together that bipartisan team that brought Maricopa County one of the best elections that we've had. As a matter of fact, as highly scrutinized as it is, turns out it's probably one of the best elections we've seen in American history, and that's provable. And we've got to make sure that we protect our institutions from instability, chaos, and unpredictability. That's what my opponent presents. That's bad for business. It's bad for the arts and sciences, medicine, law, education, across the board. We cannot have that wild-eyed extremism in these offices. We've got to have folks who are going to be fair, call balls and strikes, and be able to work in a bipartisan way. And that's the candidate that I present in myself to the voters of Arizona.
Do you think that there are some things that were learned from this intense scrutiny of this election? I'm talking about the 2020 election. Were there some things learned still from all of the examination that maybe are helpful going forward? And what would they be?
Well, absolutely, John. And I think anytime you do anything, if you're not learning from it, whether it was great or not so great, you're not paying attention. One of the things I think that's really important that people learn is that not everything that's called an audit is an audit. We heard from auditing professionals across the board who pilloried that exercise and really laid waste to the concept that was anything near an actual audit, much less a forensic audit, which is what some people are calling it.
This is a cyber ninjas audit. This is a cyber ninjas audit, right?
Yeah. And so, but insofar as election administrators are concerned, look, we got a really good chance to show yet again that hand counting ballots is less accurate than doing it with certified tabulation equipment. We learned that there are enormous amounts of logistical challenges that have to be faced. We learned that every clerk across every precinct, every marshal, every person who's working in all of the polls has a critical job, and every single one of them has to do it just right. And so when you're operating an election with literally thousands and thousands of people involved, as we did in Maricopa County, you got to cross every T and dot every I. And we've been doing something very close to that for a very, very long time in Arizona. And I think one of the most important things we learned is that we can have a high level of confidence in our elections, even with these conspiracy theories floating around that are really based in a lie.
You mentioned
that was a big deal.
You mentioned hand counting ballots. Your opponent, Mr. Finchem, and Kari Lake, who's running for governor, filed suit. As you know, it was tossed out. They wanted to stop the next election and bring in hand count for voting.
Yeah.
What can you describe, since you were the Maricopa County recorder for 4 years, what would that look like? If we were to go back to hand counting ballots, what would that look like?
Well, it wouldn't work. Let's just be honest. It would not work. And as much as we should have faith in one another, human error is far greater, shows a far greater error rate than hand counting certified equipment, as we do and as is done in just about every other jurisdiction in the United States that has, more than a dozen or two ballots out there. And particularly in Maricopa County, look, we're talking about over 2.5 million voters. And the county recorder's office that I came out of, Mr. Richer actually has made some comments about the cost, the amount of time and the potential for inaccuracy being so broad and so far beyond the pale that it just would not make any sense. We've got a system that works. It is efficient. It is cost effective. And if we want to include a whole bunch of taxpayer waste based on a lie, let's not forget that. They're asking to do this based on a lie. Then we're making bad public policy decisions for no good reason.
Can you explain, by the way, the hand count just in the audit of the 2,000, or I guess it was 2.1 million in Maricopa County votes, that took 2 months. I mean,
and it was only 2 races. Yeah. Only 2 races. It took that long. Imagine the entire ballot and all of the judges on the back. Everybody knows there's 30 or 40 judges on the back of each one. So it's unrealistic.
Why has this fraudulent election, stealing the election, a thrown election, why has this stuff persisted, in your view?
Well, because somebody's making money off of it. I mean, it's just that simple. Look, even Mr. Fincham was selling bumper stickers, hashtag Stop the Steal last fall into his campaign. He was selling T-shirts for $45 a piece into some organization, but nobody knows where any of that money went. You might want to ask him on the show later. But the bottom line is, this is about money. It's about people bilking Americans across the country. 59% of his donors are from outside of Arizona, and it's because of Stop the Steal. It's because of this grift. And we just got to call a spade a spade.
Adrian, what would you say to people who, you know, they watch the campaign and just from a visceral level, they'd say, for instance, Joe Biden largely ran a campaign from his basement. You hear that over and over. And how is it possible that he ended up with more votes than Barack Obama in something that was a movement? Everybody could see it, they could feel it. What would you tell them in Arizona that would give them comfort that the election was on the up and up?
Well, I tell them the same thing that everybody else has been telling them, that elected Republicans have been telling them. The election was run by Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and Libertarians, your neighbors, your friends. Folks who come from the community are the ones who ran this election. And the bottom line is, Joe Biden got more votes. But this election is not about 2020. This election is about moving forward. Are we going to end mail-in voting, which is what Mr. Fincham wants? Are you going to be forced to stand in line, which is what Mr. Fincham wants? Or are you going to keep those safe and secure and convenient options like ballot by mail or vote in person if you want under a Fontes administration in the secretary's office? This election is not about 2020. It's about moving forward, and it's about what we're going to see in the future. And I think people are just sick and tired of 2020 at the end of the day, John.
Okay, let's go back to 2018, because you ran for re-election for Maricopa County Recorder this past cycle, and you got beat by Stephen Richer. It wasn't by much, 5,000 some odd votes. But you did get beat. And some would say that may have been a reflection of what happened in the 2018 primary when people showed up, voters showed up on Election Day. Some of the precincts weren't ready to go. This was really your first big test as county recorder. And then some of the sign-in procedures were not ready to roll.
Sure.
So, okay, you're not going to quarrel with any of that.
No, it happened. Look, we had a system that we were introducing some new processes into to try to improve what worked and what we knew could work. We had some missteps. I took responsibility. At the end of the day, that's what people want. They want leaders who are going to stand up and say, did we find a problem, identify how to fix it, and then fix it? Yeah, that's what we did. I'm not going to run away from my record. And, you know, what really is important isn't just what happened in that one election, in the primary in 2018, but what happened in that general, what happened in the following many, many elections since then. And now you have the same Stephen Richer who beat me singing the praises of the bipartisan system that I built in Maricopa County.
Let me just follow up,
supervisors doing the same thing.
Let me just follow up with that. So given the problems in 2018, now you're running for the state's top job of overseeing elections. Why should people give you that job if you may have eroded some of their confidence in 2018? Why should they give you the top job?
You couldn't have more stark difference between the two nominees for the parties. In me, you've got an attorney, a Marine Corps veteran, a CIRA certified election administrator, and a guy with on-the-job, hands-on experience running elections. It's not a perfect record, but it's a record in learning and making things better over time. That's what folks want, versus a guy like Mark Fincham. He's got his own 2018 problem when he introduced a bill to try to take the selection of U.S. senators away from voters and put it in the hands of the legislature. That's right. He doesn't want you voting for U.S. Senate. He wants the legislature to appoint. He did that in the spring of 2018, way before the big lie. And later on, he joined on the efforts to try to take presidential elections away from voters as well, letting the legislature try to overturn elections if they don't like the results.
I will ask him.
Fincham does not want you and your vote to count.
I'll ask him about that shortly because he's coming up later in the program. A couple more things, just quick takes because we've only got about 30 seconds. Sure. What's your position on voter ID laws here in Arizona? Should voters
Arizona has voter ID laws, and we should continue to do it for in-person voting and maintain a very secure mail-in system like we have.
What about proof of citizenship for voting? How do you feel about that?
I think proof of citizenship is the same thing. That's the state of the law in Arizona. We've got a great system for making sure that all eligible voters can vote. And I think we should integrate more systems in so that we can have more certainty in the eligibility of our citizen voters.
Finally, what defines this race to you?
Well, what defines this race is American democracy versus totalitarianism. It's that simple.
That's a strong word. That's a strong word.
I represent a fair fight. He wants to tell you who you should vote for, and he wants to make you stand in line. That's not the candidate you see in me.
Adrian Fontes, good to see you. It's been a while. Appreciate it.
Yep.
And thanks. Best of luck, and we'll talk to you soon. And coming